Hello everyone, Mike with Spray Jones. Going over a fascinating subject with the spray foam that's gotten a lot of comments and questions, so it's time to do a proper video on it, which is closed cell 2-pound foam being approved for contact with the ground. So this would pertain to either an external basement, external concrete, or crawl spaces. Now, I've already done a video on under slab insulation, so click on the channel, the YouTube channel, and I've got a whole host of topics that you might find interesting. In fact, if you like this content, stick around because I've got a lot of your questions already answered in videos that we've already made. But getting towards the spray foam, in 2014, we had this officially approved. Now, I'm showing you this document here by Morrison Hershfield because at the time, we came to BASF and we said, listen, we've got a lot of requests to put the spray foam on externally on concrete to replace rigid styrofoam, whether it be white bead board or whether it be extruded polystyrene. But we need the certifications. We need the testing. So this was the result of that. This was, they already had the data. They just had to compile it and put it into a cohesive document that everybody could look at. So in this document here, they state that they have prepared generic details by BASF to illustrate methods to insulate and provide moisture control of below-grade building components using wall-tight, medium-density spray-applied polyurethane foam. Right? And that you can apply the product either directly in contact with the ground or where it's going to come in intermittent contact with the ground. But the section that I really want you to see is protection from moisture in ground. So sections 5.8 and sections 9 of the National Building Code of Canada have requirements for moisture control of building elements that are in contact with the ground. Research done by the National Research Council of Canada, that's what NRC means, supports wall-tight installed outboard of cast-in-place concrete. So that's your basement, right? You have a slip form, the form comes off, you've got concrete cast in place, that's what they're talking about. So an installed outboard of cast-in-place concrete is providing the required level of moisture protection, i.e. damp proofing and capillary break for building materials in contact with soil that are not subject to hydrostatic pressure. The research evaluated foundation walls, but in their opinion, the findings also support the application of wall-tight as damp proofing below floors on ground. So this rolls in your crawl spaces where instead of putting down a gypcrete lining or a membrane system, you can put the spray foam in. Now we're going to handle that in section 2. This is section 1, dealing with external basements. So the main objective that we have found with spraying of outside of concrete is time of the year. If you're going to be applying the foam, whether it's an inch or 2 or 3, you're going to have to do it when it's warm. And being that the concrete is not insulated on one side, you're going to have a very difficult time to hoard and heat. So this leaves it up to, for a Canadian or cold weather American, you're going to be dealing with putting this on only in the spring to late fall months. And then added to that, you're going to have to be doing it in a situation where you're not in high wind because you don't want to start painting the cars and the other construction sites that are around in the workers' vehicles. So what we have found is that if the ground is opened up, the concrete is poured, the forms have been stripped off, and they're now ready to get ready for putting the floor joists on for backfill, now's the time to get in. And if the ground is tight enough, we can tarp between the building and the earth and create a natural windbreak inside the ground, and then we can spray from the foam down from grade level down to the footing and get everything the way that they need it. We just probe as we go along, and we can build up the requisite amount of thickness of what they need. In certain situations, if they're very cost prohibitive an inch is all they're going to be getting. But if they are trying to be the principal insulation for the building, they might go with 2 or even as much as 3 inches. We've done a couple of parkades this way. We've done some residential and light commercial. It works out incredibly well, especially when you can put all of the insulation to the outside, and then internally the building is warm and there's no need for any additional insulation internally. Now, you can do insulation internally, especially on a house or something if you want, but you don't have to, provided that you've been able to take the foam as high as it needs to go. When you're going above grade, it becomes more complicated. If the spray foam is going to be on the concrete higher than the dirt level is going to be, I suggest putting some strapping out ahead of time, and then making sure that the spray foam is shallower than the depth of the strapping, and that way you can put paneling or siding or wood and then stucco it, or you can do some sort of a panelized product over top of 1 to 2 feet or even 3 feet of exposed polyurethane foam. We did that on a commercial building and it worked out quite well. They actually did a brick ledge detail where the spray foam stopped, and they brought their paneling down in front of the spray foam, hovering it right in front of the spray foam until it came to grade level, and nobody ever knew that it was there. From the street, you couldn't even tell that had been sprayed. So don't think of it as being a huge, complex issue if you need to bring your spray foam taller than the ground. You just have to do some planning and do some Z-girts and have something that you can have a true surface to, because the spray foam is never going to be true. It's going to be lumpy and bumpy, and it's not something you're going to want to scratch coat and try to put stucco over. And if you're going to be putting siding on, you need something to screw to. So you've got to put in your vertical or horizontal slatting ahead of time, and then from there you can put the spray foam in, and then the siding or whatever is going to hover in half an inch or an inch ahead of the spray foam, and your detail will look aesthetically pleasing. We have done probably most of the jobs that we do are 3 to 4 times faster than if they were doing it in board stock. The problem with the board stock is that they have to go and they usually have to put some sort of a membrane up or a waterproofing, damp proofing up. They have to wait for that to dry, and then they put the boarding on, and then the boarding has to be Tapconned into concrete. So this is very slow, and the spray foam is designed to be a one-step system. You show up, the concrete is bare, you put the spray foam on, and then you're good to go. No additional damp proofing, and that's exactly what it's stating in these documents, is that no additional product is needed over top of the spray foam. Now, one thing you are going to want to be careful of is that you don't have an ultra-high water table level. If you are in a saturation point all of the time, then maybe some additional coating is going to have to be placed on the spray foam to make sure that it doesn't absorb more water than it should. But in normal situations where you have a weeping tile, you have drainage, and you have normal backfill around the building where it's going to have a normal wet and then arid cycle, and that there's somewhere for the water to go, it's not sitting in swampland or something like that, you're going to be fine. But again, all of our product and all of our approvals have been reviewed. They've been signed off by the engineer. We've submitted them to the local authorities having jurisdiction for building code approvals, and we're good to go. And that's what you want to do. If you are a contractor, or if you're a building owner, or you're looking to use foam externally, you're going to want to find a contractor in your area that has certifications, has their product tested, has documentation, and then you submit that to your local authorities and have that approved. Don't just start putting product on because you put something in the ground and then they haven't approved of it. They can make you dig something up in order to put an additional damp proofing on it. And it's all down to liability with the building inspectors. They don't care too much functionally if it works or doesn't work. All they care about is whether or not they're going to be getting into trouble over what you've done. So if you can prove to them that they're not on the hook, that you're on the hook, and that you do have the necessary documentation to prove that, then you're good to go. So we've done an enormous amount of this stuff, and when the weather works and the project is right for it, it flows very, very quickly. We can rattle off 5, 6, 7,000 square feet in just a matter of days, whereas they'd be doing it in weeks of time. And one of the closing great advantages to this is if you're having a large commercial building, it can be a hassle to have a lot of rigid insulation on site and stocking it, not having it blow away, not having it get damaged. And as a result, sometimes it's way better to have one spray foam truck and one crew come out and do what you would do with rigid rather than having all the rigid piled up. Likewise, we've seen other guys really like when we've done like foam aprons where we've had the spray foam come down the wall and then the engineers requiring that the spray foam or the insulation be out laterally, horizontally, away from the footings. They want frost heave protection. Normally they're going to do that with rigid. They're just laying rigid inside the cavity down on the ground. And that becomes a real problem too, because when they go to backfill it, the rigid is twisting and breaking and not staying in place. Whereas with the spray foam, it's quasi adhered to the dirt, if you will, down in the trench. And they're not having an issue when they go to backfill. In a lot of cases, they don't break the spray foam. You'd think that the spray foam is very delicate. It's not. It can take quite a bit of abuse. The fact that it's in intimate contact with either the wall or the actual ground means that you don't have a hollow space underneath it that's easy to put weight on and snap it and break a chunk of it off. And we've seen some pretty good abuse. When we first started doing this, some guys wanted to see if they could wreck it, and they started throwing some pretty big chunks of rock or huge mud clumps and what have you in, trying to break the foam, and it didn't. It bangs up the surface a little bit, but that's going to be the same whether you're using board stock or not. And then not having to tape seams, not having to go around and deal with joints, I think is a massive overlooked advantage. You're putting on a monolithic liquid applied structure that the water has to find someplace else to go. It doesn't have literally tens of thousands of inches of seams that it can get behind and in. And then if you're having a freeze-thaw cycle and water gets in behind your board and then freezes, it's going to start to pop the board off. So with spray foam, as long as it's dry when you go to put it on, it should be there. If the installer does his job properly, it's going to be there for life, and it's not going to be coming off easily. So I think it's a very good method. I think the engineering is sound. It's there. It's behind it. And I think it's worthy of our trust because it is one piece. It is in the ground. It's not going to rot, and it's not going to break down over time. It's inert. Okay, section 2, applying the spray foam, the closed cell foam in crawl spaces, particularly to the soil, to be the vapor barrier and also some thermal insulation. Let's go back to the chart and the technical document, the engineering paper that I saw in the beginning here, but I want to concentrate on this paragraph here on the first page. Supporting research for the use of spray-applied polyurethane foam for below-grade applications has been completed by the National Research Council, NRC. NRC research included in situ monitoring and testing of spray-applied polyurethane foam installed on the exterior of basement walls in contact with the soil. The test assemblies relied on the spray-applied polyurethane foam to provide the moisture control from the soil. Temperatures, water movement, and thermal resistance were evaluated over a 31-month period and tested for moisture content and compressive strength after the in-situ monitoring. Now, if we scroll down, that is telling us that it has the documentation, the technical facts to support being in contact with the ground. Now, vapor barrier requirements, sections 5 and sections 9. So just so you understand, section 5 and sections 3 of the National Building Code deal with commercial buildings, and the entire section of 9 deals with residential or small commercial, meaning wood-framed commercial buildings. So sections 5 and sections 9 have requirements for resistance to vapor diffusion. Both sections require that materials providing the resistance to vapor resistance conform to the ASTM E96 water vapor transmission of materials tests. And then they go on to say that sentences 9.25 require that vapor barriers have a permeance not greater than 60 nanograms. And where foamed plastic is used, it shall be sufficiently thick to meet that requirement for permeance. Here's the money shot. Wall-Tite has a permeance less than 60 nanograms for 25 millimeters of thickness or greater, measured in accordance with the ASTM E96 test. Moreover, Wall-Tite installed outboard of cast-in-place concrete grade beams, foundation walls, and floor slabs meets the requirements of positioning of the vapor control layer to minimize moisture accumulation within the building envelope. So, when it comes to a crawl space, the spray foam can be applied internally inside the crawl space to the soil, to the rock, and that is your insulation and that is your vapor control. You don't need to use something else. So I'm going to switch to another screen here. Okay, here is an example of a new home that's being built by one of the builders we work for, and they're incorporating spray foam into the crawl space. So in this situation, this is a top cord bearing floor joist system, open web floor joist system to keep the height of the home down. The grade beam is going to be poured on piles, and then before the floor joists are installed, we're going to come in and spray the amount of spray foam onto the grade beam, inside of the grade beam, and then across the rock. Now this is 4 inches of crushed radon rock with a depressurizing system as per the National Building Code has to have. So it's a pipe with holes, and positive air is passed through it through a ventilation fan to take any of the soil gases out and vent them out of the house. This is code. So we try to spray to rock as much as possible. There's 4 inches of rock. You do not need to put down plastic. You do not need to put down cardboard. You don't need to put down a membrane of some type and then spray the foam. Okay? The foam is going to sit on the surface of the rock. There's going to be plenty of depth underneath that for moisture to move, air to move, gas to move. The foam isn't going to plug anything off. However, the issue that you have installing the rock is if the rock is extremely coarse, you're going to have a difficult time sealing it up. Or if the rock is wet, you're going to have a difficult time. You're not going to be able to get the spray foam to stick to it. So, in the event that it's rough, coarse, or wet, we'll have the builder put down plywood on top of the rock, 3/8 or 1/4 inch, something cheap. One guy even got 1/8 paneling. Something incredibly cheap, $6 a sheet, $4 a sheet. And that way the plywood is weighty enough that enough of the sheets are down that the spray foam is not going to lift it. See, if you go and put down a membrane, and the membrane is not well fastened, it's loose. When the spray foam starts to cool, it's going to lift. It's going to lift the membrane up because the foam is contracting. It has to. When it goes on hot and when it cools, it contracts. It's not shrinkage, it's just contraction. And it's going to lift that membrane right off the rock. So if you have plywood down, then you won't be affected by any moisture or any snow. If it rained just the night before, or if you still have fairly high water content around the construction site and it hasn't dried out yet, had a situation, they needed us to spray on a Tuesday because somebody was coming on a Wednesday, but it wasn't dry enough. So what choice do you have? You have to put down a sheet product of some sort, plywood in that situation, and then spray to that. So back to this. We'll spray the sides, we'll spray the rock, either right direct to the rock or the substrate that we've just discussed. And then that'll be brought up to the edge. They'll put their floor joists on, they'll build the structure, and then from there we'll be back, or they'll be back in, somebody will be back in to tie in this last little connection between the spray foam and the top cord bearing area. In a situation where a crawl space is tall enough, say 4 or 5 feet, 5 feet crawl space, you can put the floor truss system on entirely and then go inside and spray foam kneeling over. Like if you can do the space on your feet as opposed to on your knees or on your belly, then you're good to go. And you can put the spray foam down. We have the foam applied at 1 inch thick for approvals as you've seen in the document. But most situations are putting on 2 because they want the thermal resistance. as long as the rock is not settling and sagging down, the spray foam will be stuck for the rest of its life down there. We have seen situations where the soil has settled and created voids behind the foam, and it is touch-upable. You can drill a hole in the foam and inject the foam right into the cavity and build it back up. But in most situations, if things are compacted, settled, and you've taken extra steps to compact it so it won't settle drastically, then you're going to be fine. The foam can be walked on. The closed cell 2-pound foam carries 30 psi of compressive strength. That's going to be the same as any board stock. If you're doing light duties, it's fine. If you're going to go down into the crawl space and do storage and heavy duty moving around of items, suitcases, large items, you're constantly going to be jumping in and out through an access hatch, then yeah, you're probably going to want to throw down some sheets of plywood on top of the spray foam to absorb some of the impact. But that's just normal thinking. I mean, you can tear a hole in a membrane, you can punch holes in concrete if you're rough enough. We find that this system works the best when you're right at the frost line. So you've got a warm crawl space, you've got a warm floor, you've got warm sides. It's an entire bowl of insulation. And then everything, all the plumbing, all the ductwork, all the mechanical equipment is installed into that shell, and it's warm. And so it's much superior to like a Permalon membrane or a Gypcrete coating, because you get the thermals out of it. And we're seeing more and more people that are saying that's exactly what they want to do. They can walk in to it, they can step on it, but it's warm, and it keeps the crawl space a climate, the right climate year round. Now, you can't go putting spray foam onto just straight dirt, okay? It's got to be well compacted, and it's got to be not powdery. If it's powdery, the second that the spray hits it, it's going to make a huge amount of dust everywhere, and the foam is just going to lift right off of it. You've got to have a fairly cohesive, locked-in substrate. So that's why the rock works best, or if you want to do it on the dirt, fine, but it's got to be well compacted, almost like a mud base, like a road base almost, and then it will stick half decently. But most situations, they're looking for some sort of rock drainage in the space anyhow, whether it's under slab or whether it's within a crawl space, and this works the best to go onto that rock. I just insist that the people keep the rocks to 1 inch diameter or less, and that they be well compacted. Don't have great big huge lumps and bumps everywhere, because whatever profile you give us in the crawl space is what the spray foam is going to mimic. And we can go around all of the plumbing and all of the penetrations. Anything going to the outside, the spray foam can conform around to all of it. And I mean, I've been doing this now for 6 years in crawl spaces with this system, and I haven't encountered one situation yet that's been a problem. The only problem is application, which is just making sure things are dry and the timing of things. But once we've installed it, the people love it. It is so warm, it's so dry. I've been in the crawl spaces after. You can crawl around in them, especially if you've got some lights in them and what have you. It's dry, it's easy to slide around in there, and there's no smell, there's no mustiness to it. It's not damp one bit. It's warm the entire time, and it's actually quite quiet. The spray foam absorbs a lot of sound because the profile of the foam is not perfectly smooth. It's kind of like that egg cartony shape, and it just deadens the noise down in the space. It's quite tranquil. You could actually go down there and have a sleep. So this is a very approved system. Get the engineering done. Get your spray foam approved. Get your installer to have the paperwork necessary, and then you can incorporate this into your build. It's quite easy. It's quite effective. And once you've done it, I don't think you'll ever go back to doing things the old-fashioned way with rolled sheet goods. Just dealing with the product, getting it to site, and having to roll it out and seam it and adhere it and glue it is a real pain compared to what the spray foam can give you. So click, share, like, and subscribe on the video. I hope this has answered most of your questions on how to get this product installed and why you'd want to get it installed in these areas. You got any other questions, by all means, shoot me a message on here. Otherwise, check out the other videos that we've got. Stay connected, stay subscribed. New videos coming out all the time.